Welcome back to the channel. So today we would be starting our Python series. So here in this series we would be learning the advanced topic of Python, and to begin with we would start with the exception handling, right? So here we would learn the advanced topic, right? So what you will learn in this series basically of the exception handling. So the today's lecture we would be covering the basics of exception handling, right? So here, what all things we would be learning. So we'll learn like the try except block. Before this, without what happens if we don't use without try except, right? What happened when we write the code without try except block? Then we would learn the different types of exceptions, right? We'll implement two or three of them, right? Then we'll learn about the syntax like this: try, except, and then um, else block, right? And then we'll learn try, except, else, and finally. So we'll learn all these keywords. So this would be the lecture one, and then what you can expect in the lecture two is we'll basically play with arrays keyword. So if you have any background of the exception handling, so you might be knowing that how important this raise keyword is. So basically this playlist would be related, this won't be a basics, basically entirely basic. So I would try to cover the topics or the scenarios which we get in our day-to-day life, right? Life in the industry. So we'll try to cover those kind of concept. Basically, I will try to generate those kind of scenarios. Like the initial, this today's lecture, we would be covering basics only, but in our future videos, like how we'll deal with the raise keyword and how to use them, what are their impact if we use them, and then the nested like the try catch block and all those things. Basically, all those will be covered in the second video. So I think this would be the very important video, right? Then the third is we would learn about the custom error handling, basically, or error handling. And then once we are done with all the concept, basically, then what we'll start is we'll start covering the different scenarios. So we'll cover the different scenarios, different exception handling scenarios. So this is what you can expect from this exceptional handling in Python series, basically, right? So let's begin with the basics. So you might be knowing like what exactly the exception handling is and why we need. So I don't think I need to explain this. Let me explain if someone is very don't have any idea about the exception handling. So let me change the color of pen. So let's say if you write a code, a simple code, let's say I write this for I in range 1 to 10, right? And I write print I, got it? So like if we write this piece of code without any try except block, that is if we don't handle the exception, and if there is any issue, let's say the if we let's say if we provide n over here and then the n is not defined, basically, right? If n is something like that, if there is any exception basically over here, or let's say if n is coming from the parameter and we have not given properly, and something like that. So let's say if the we have written this in the a function, here the parameter which we are expecting is m, and here we are writing n, then this is the exception, right? This we call as I think name exception, name error basically, because we are writing some different name and we should write m, but we are writing n. So in these kind of scenario where we have not handled the exception, the program will break, right? We don't want it, like there are multiple scenarios basically. Sometime what we want, let's say if the code is getting executed from 1 to 5 and at line number 6 error, like the exception happened, so sometime we want this exception to be handled, right? So that's where this except keyword comes, right? All those things are there. And sometimes what we want the program to be broken, like we don't want to execute anything after the line number 6. So all these scenarios are there. That's why like we need a try catch try except block where we handle these kind of scenario, uh, right? So let's start. So basically this is the geeks for geeks blocks. I found this very helpful. So these are the basically different type of exception in Python. So these are the different type of exception. You can see we have a lot of type of exception. Basically the syntax error, type error. So what is type error? You can basically read. So it is not possible to cover all these type of exceptions in a video, right? So you can obviously go through the blogs and understand, right? So there are some few common exception which we need to know. So those I will be dealing today. So here you can see that like what is the type error. So this exception is raised when an operation or a function is applied to the object of a wrong type, such as adding the string to an integer. This we will see in our future part of this video. Then we have the name error. I explained you like we use a variable which is not defined in the program, and then index error. Let's say we have a list of 4 element and we try to like access the fifth element, then we can get these kind of exception, right? So these are the different type of exception. Divide by zero exception that we will learn today. Let's say if we have a variable and we try to divide it by 100. So this is possible, right, while dealing in a real-time project. So these are the different type of exception. So here we have the like the syntax error, right? So let's understand this thing. So let's say uh, we'll try to learn the syntax error. So here if you see the syntax error, here we don't have colon, right? And the indentation is also not proper. So like let's see what happened. So if you see, like we got this exception, right? The syntax error exception we got. So before looking into this, let's see the like the hierarchy in which the exception are defined. So here if you see like in the documentation, if you see the built-in exception and their hierarchy. So these are the different type of exceptions. So basically you don't have to remember each and every type. You can obviously go through the documentation every time, right? Whenever you need, whenever you are doing the development. So this is important basically to know what is the type of like what is the hierarchy of exception, because we have a lot of type of exception, right? So here if you see the first is the system exit keyboard, like if something we press from the keyboard while the program is getting executed. And this is the generator exit exception, like we gracefully what we do, we like try to raise an exception and we stop the program, and these are the exception at runtime basically. We have the stop error, stop iteration, and then like the arithmetic errors and all those things, right? We have the assertion error, like which we use in the while testing, while performing the testing of the particular function and all those things. So these are the different type of exception basically. So let's see. So here if you see, like here we are writing the code where the syntax is wrong. So we got exception, right? Let's say if we put this piece of code in try except block. I said that what we put over here, let me explain you. So like how to decide which piece of code to put in the try or try except block. So syntax is like this: try code except. So this should be in the small case. Let me remove. So we write except. exception as E, and here we can write print E. So what exactly we should write in here, like here? So wherever we expect or wherever we think that this piece of code can generate an error, that's where we should try to put those piece of code in the try block, right? So let's say if you are fetching a data from the API, right? So there are a lot of scenarios in which we like there are a lot of case in which we can get the exception in this, like the let's say the server is down or the API is not proper or the payload which we passed via that particular API is not correct. So these kind of code we should always put in the exception. Let's say you are doing the DB query, right? So in those scenario, we should put like those particular piece of code in the try catch block, right? So I'm like saying try catch block. So catch is nothing but same as except only. So in Java we have the try catch, and here in Python we call it as try except. Got it? Okay, so now you understood like which piece of code we should put in except block, like try catch block, or and what are the things which we should not. So let's say if we put this piece of code in try except block, let's see what happens. Uh, Try to remember that here we have the syntax error, right? These are the things which we are not getting at the runtime basically. So let's say we write except, and we write the generic exception as E, and we print this exception. Let's see what we are getting. So now if you see, like this program is not getting executed only. Why? Because this is the syntax error. And because this is the syntax error, like what we want the program should not break basically. Let's say if I write this after the uh, try except block. So like we have written the except block, we should the program should not stop, right? But the program is getting stopped. Why? Because this is the syntax error. It is not like the error is getting occurred at the runtime. Got it? So like let's write like this. So let me correct this and let me run now this. So now you can see we corrected our syntax, and this is program is getting executed properly. Okay. So let's see the other thing. So this is basically the divide by zero exception, right? So here we have the marks as 10,000, and we are dividing that particular marks by zero, and we are getting the division by zero error. So this all these things we will see. So let's go via this example only, right? So this piece of code, so code without any error. So let's say uh, we write we write here like this. So here we have 100, like 10,000, and we are dividing this particular number by, let me zoom a little. Okay. So we are dividing it by 10. So what we should expect? We should expect a division, proper division, right? Let's see. Here you can see we got properly 1000. Let me put this in this like this so that we can get the integer only. So here you can see we got 1000 properly, right? And let's put this print start, and here let's start of execution, and let's put here end of execution, right? So now you can see we got everything what we expected. So here we don't have anything, we don't have any exception basically, right? This code ran properly. Let's say we have a code with runtime exception, right? So let's say we divide this by 0, right? And let's see what we are getting. So now you can see how the program got executed. So this, like, let me explain you via this code, via the pen. Okay. So now if you see, this piece of code got executed, right? Line number 4, and we got this uh, print message. Then this line of code got executed, and then this line number 6, here we got exception, right? And we didn't, and this exception got raised, and we didn't receive this print message, right? We don't have anything like the end of execution over here. Why? Because the program got failed and like it is not printing anything after that, right? So let's see what happened if we put this entire piece of code in try except block. So let me write try, then piece of code, and then except exception as e, print e. I will explain you this like the why we are writing exception over here, why not anything else, and all those things. So just bear with me for these piece of code, right? So let me write this, and let me write after after try except block. Let me run this. So now if you see, okay, now if you see how the code got executed, this piece of code, line number 2 got executed and we got this. And then divide by 0. So here what happened, the exception occurred, right? Exception occurred and then and there the code came to this point, like the line number 7, and we got, we are printing over here, right? The print E. Let's say if I write like this, print inside the exception block, right? Let's see what happened now. So now if you see, let me explain you how this code is getting executed and how we are getting the data. So how the execution is happening. So this piece of code got executed and we got this line basically. And then here the exception occurred, right? So now if you see the next line which we got is this inside the except block. We didn't got this line, like the line number 6 end of execution. Why? This is how the exception this is how the try catch block basically work. So wherever the exception is raised, it what it tries to find is it try to find the exception except block. So where this exception is getting handled. So why the previous like when we wrote the code without try except, why the code got failed, right? Why? Because we had not handled that piece of code, right? So that's why. But here if you see, like we are not getting any trash back or anything like that. The program is running properly fine. It shows that we have handled that piece of code. That's why. So if you see here, like the after try catch block, this line of code is getting printed. But if you don't write this piece of code basically in the try except block, you will not get this piece of code, right? Why? Because you have not handled it. But here we have handled. Since we have handled, so we are getting this line number 11 getting printed over here. So let's see the order in which we have got the message. We got this start of execution, and then we here the exception got occurred, exception occurred, and we came to the except block. In the except block, we have written this line of code, right? Inside the except block, this got printed, and then we have the print E. So what is E? E basically the exception. So what type of exception? Since this exception is a generic, so we have a different type of exception. Basically, we write type error, divide by 0, division by 0, and then exception. So this is nothing but the generic exception basically. This we write at the end of the all the except block, right? That we will see like in I think within 5 minutes. And then we have this e over here, and this is what we are getting over after the this divide by 0 message. We are getting the this message basically. I think you understood how this except block is working now. So this was basically the generic exception. Let's say if we write the division by 0 exception, right, properly. So let me write like this. Let's say we handle the basically uh, in a very generic way. So let's say if we write like this, so divide by 0 we need, right? So division, uh, okay. So what we can do, we can copy this thing. So the name of the exception is division 0 exception. So we can write division 0 exception as E, and we can print inside the division by 0 division 0 error block, and we can print this E over here, right? So in a program, it is not necessary that we will have only this kind of exception. Let's say we can have the name error also, that I will show you. So let's say if I write like this, name error. So this is also a possible exception, right? So we can write name error block, and we can put. So when we get the name error, we get the name error when we use a variable which is not defined. So let's see, as of now, we have put in this. These are the granular level of exception, like how to decide like what exactly we should write over here. So let's say like while writing the program, you must be knowing that what exactly operation you are trying to perform in the try block, and accordingly you will write these except block, and at the end you will write the generic exception, basically the except, right? Because if none of the above these exception block except block like handle your error, then this will definitely accept that particular exception, right? Because this is the generic, this accept each and every type of exception. So let's see what we are getting over here now after executing this. So so now if you see, like this piece of code got executed, and we got this line got printed, and then we got this inside the zero block, inside the zero division error. Why? Because this, like what it did, like what exactly the program did, it tried to find like if this type of error is getting handled below or not. So if it didn't find any of those type, then it comes to the generic exception, but it found, right? So it printed this piece of code, and then we have this print E, right, at the line number 9. So we got that, and then we have the message after the basically handling these kind of exception. So I think, I hope you understood this piece of code. Let's try to generate basically the name error. The main point you need to like notice is, if you see like this piece of code is not getting executed. Why? Because we are getting exception at line number 4. So line number 5 and line number 6 will not get executed, right? So that is how the exception and everything work. If these get executed, then the calculation will become wrong, right? So that we need to handle. And in order to write the different type of exception, what you can do, let's say you are calling an API, then you can get the different type of exception that you can Google, basically the runtime exception and all this exception, right? You don't have to remember each and everything. You just need to know the concept, basically how you can use. Other than that, like the syntax and all those things you can find online. So let's say if we write a code where we don't get exception. Let's say if I write here 100, now this proper syntax is proper, right? So we should get this piece of code get executed. So let's see. So now you can see we got end of execution block, and we didn't receive anything like inside any of the block. These kind of block, we didn't receive any of such messages. So I hope you understood this piece of code. Let me write this. Let me raise the name error, right? So let's say if we try to divide this, uh, so if you see, mark is not defined over here, right? And we are using mark over here. So let me run this piece of code. Now we should get the name error. Okay, now you can see we are getting a messages inside the name error block. Why? Because the name mark is not defined. I hope you understood this. Let's say if we try to raise any kind of exception which is not there, basically, which is not, we have not handled. So let's say type error. Let's say we try to erase a type error. So what exactly the type error is? Let's say if we try to add a string with an integer, let me correct this. So here we don't have any type of any such exception. Let's say if we write print erasing type error. So and here we write x equal to let's say if we write integer 5, like uh, okay, integer 5 and then string 5, and let's try to print x, right? And let's try to run this. So now, if you see, if you see what exactly we are getting start of execution, then we are getting 1000 over here, then we are getting end of execution. This piece of code is getting executed. Then we have the raising type error. That particular line of code is getting executed. And then here, if you see, we are getting inside the except block. Why inside the except block? Because we here we don't we have not written the type error. Basically, we have not handled that kind of exception. So that's why we are coming into the generic kind of exception. And here that particular piece of code is handled, and here we are getting inside the except block, and here we are getting the message. Basically, the integer is getting added with the string, right? And here after that, this piece of code is getting executed. So I hope you understood this piece of code. Now let me explain you the try, except, and like these all the things which I had written. We have handled all these things. So now let's see this piece of code. So here the syntax is try, except, and else block. So like when this come into the rescue. So let me write like this. So we have the different, now the next syntax is try. So here we write our code basically. Then we write except, let's say we write name error as E, and then we write print E, and then let's say we write except, let's say we write key error as E, and we print E, and then let's say we write else. So what exactly, okay, before writing else, the good practice is we should always write exception, like the generic except block. Why? Because let's say if none of the above except block handled your exception, like, right? So it's always a good practice to write the generic exception. So we can write um, exception as E, and we can write over here the print E, and then we'll write X else, right? So what this piece of what the syntax this means. So what we are saying, let me explain this. So here we are saying try to execute this if this if there is any exception occurred, then try to handle over here. If nothing is like occurred, then run this else block. Understood? Let me like give the demo of it. So before going to the demo, let's see over here. Basically, these are the syntax which I explain you, right? So I think I have covered each and everything over here. So if you execute, if no exception, so like you can understand from here also. And the like I didn't tell you the finally keyword. So finally is nothing but this always get executed, right? So in a program, what happen? You create a database connection, right? You want that database connection to be closed once the execution is done. So there we need a finally keyword. Finally keyword is a keyword like or a block which always get executed, which always get executed. It doesn't matter if exception occurred or not, right? So this we'll see in the execution. So let's see. So this is the syntax basically, and let's try to simulate this. So here let's keep all these things, and let's see if we write the else block also. So we'll write else, and we'll write inside the else block, right? So as of now, we are raising the exception. Let's say if we don't raise any exception, everything is running fine. Here I have removed the exception. Here also I have removed the exception. Let's see what we are getting. So now if you see like everything, like here division is happened properly, here the summation of the 5 plus 5 happened properly, and like everything got executed properly, and we are getting this inside the else block. Let's say if we raise any exception, let's say if I raise this exception, basically we are adding an integer with a string value. Let's see what we are getting. So now if you see, we didn't receive this message inside the else block. Why? Because the exception got occurred, and this piece of code only get executed when there is no exception. I hope you understood this piece of code also. Now let's understand the finally keyword also. So let's say if I write like this, finally close the DB connection. So here we write that piece of code, basically close the DB connection. uh, okay, and let me write the generic message over here. So I can we can write I always get executed. So let me run this. So now if you see, we got exception, but these piece of code get executed. I always get executed and close the DB connection, right? So I hope I covered all these things beautifully and you understood all these things. What you can do, you can try it by yourself, all these examples. And I think now the basics are clear. Basically, we have handled all these things. In our next video, we'll understand what is the importance of raise keyword, when we should use the raise keyword, when one should not use the raise keyword, how to like work with the nested try catch block, and all those things we'll see in our next video. Try to practice all these things which I showed you in your local system, else you will not understand basically, because these are the concepts which we need to experience. It's not like you will see the video and you will be like, yes, I know, I can handle these things in a real time environment, or in like the you can solve the prod issue or any kind of issues basically, right? So try it by yourself. Let's meet in the next video. Until then, bye.